distinguished seekers of psychological truth and explorers of the human condition. I address you today to illuminate one of the most profound mysteries of our time, the enigmatic nature of empathic consciousness and the hidden mechanisms that govern its operation. Our exploration today, why empaths feel drained, you're not listening, you're merging, will guide us through the labyrinthine corridors of the psyche, where the boundaries between individual consciousness and collective emotional experience dissolve into something far more complex and transformative than we have previously understood. In undertaking this journey, I shall serve as your companion through the depths of analytical psychology, weaving together the threads of archetypal knowledge, unconscious dynamics, and the profound mysteries that lie at the heart of empathic perception. We shall discover that what we commonly term listening in the empathic experience is, in truth, a far more profound psychological phenomenon, a complete merging of consciousness that transcends the ordinary boundaries of individual awareness. To begin our exploration, we must first establish a clear understanding of what constitutes true empathic consciousness. The empath is not merely an individual possessed of heightened emotional sensitivity or enhanced capacity for sympathy. Rather, the empath represents a unique psychological type whose very consciousness operates on frequencies that resonate with the collective emotional field of humanity itself. This resonance is not a passive reception of emotional data. It is an active, dynamic participation in the emotional reality of others, a dissolution of the ego boundaries that typically maintain the separation between self and other. When we examine this phenomenon through the lens of analytical psychology, we discover that the empath's consciousness functions as what I have termed a permeable vessel, a psychic container whose walls are naturally thin, allowing for the free flow of emotional and psychic content between the individual and their environment. And this permeability is both the source of the empath's extraordinary gifts and the root of their most profound challenges. The process that occurs within empathic consciousness is not mere emotional observation or cognitive understanding. It is fundamentally a merging, a temporary but complete fusion of psychic contents that transforms the empath's inner landscape to mirror that of those around them. In this state of merger, the empath does not simply perceive another's emotions. They experience them as their own, their consciousness becoming a living repository for the emotional experiences of others. This merging occurs on multiple levels of the psyche simultaneously. At the conscious level, the empath may experience a sudden shift in mood or emotional state that corresponds to the hidden feelings of those in their vicinity. At the unconscious level, however, a far more profound process unfolds. The empath's psyche temporarily adopts the archetypal patterns, complexes, and even shadow contents of others, creating a temporary psychological amalgamation that can persist long after the initial contact has ended. Let us consider the archetypal dimension of this phenomenon. Within the collective unconscious, the empath embodies what we might call the archetype of the psychic mirror, a primordial pattern that serves as a reflecting surface for the emotional and spiritual contents of the human community. This archetype carries within it both the blessing of profound understanding and the curse of endless absorption, For the mirror must take on the image of whatever stands before it, losing its own reflection in the process. The psychic mirror archetype is closely aligned with the ancient figure of the oracle, the one who speaks not from personal knowledge, but as a vessel for truth that emerge from the collective depths. Yet unlike the oracle, who serves as a conduit for divine wisdom, the empathic mirror often becomes flooded with the unprocessed emotional material of others, creating a state of psychic overwhelm that can lead to complete depletion of personal energy reserves. This depletion occurs because the merging process requires the empath to sacrifice their own psychic boundaries, the very structures that maintain psychological integrity and personal identity. When these boundaries dissolve, the empath's energy becomes available to others, often flowing outward to fill the emotional voids and heal the psychic wounds of those they encounter. The result is a gradual but persistent drainage of vital force, leaving the empath feeling hollow, exhausted, and disconnected from their own authentic self. Dreams offer us profound insights into the empathic merging process. The empath frequently experiences dreams of drowning, not in water, but in an ocean of foreign emotions, waves of sorrow, anger, and despair that belong to others, yet feel devastatingly personal. Alternatively, they may dream of being a sponge that expands endlessly, absorbing liquid until it threatens to burst, or of standing in a hall of mirrors where every reflection shows a different face, each carrying its own emotional signature. These dream symbols reveal the unconscious recognition of the merging process and its effects upon the empathic psyche. The drowning dreams speak to the overwhelming nature of emotional absorption, while the sponge imagery highlights the indiscriminate nature of empathic reception. The Hall of Mirrors represents the loss of personal identity that occurs when the empath becomes a receptacle for multiple consciousness streams simultaneously. The energetic aspect of empathic merging cannot be overlooked. From the perspective of psychic energy dynamics, the empath functions as what we might term an open circuit, a consciousness system that lacks the natural insulators and resistances that typically regulate the flow of psychic energy between individuals. This openness allows for extraordinary sensitivity and perception, but also creates a condition of chronic energy leakage that can lead to severe psychological and physical depletion. The empath's energy field operates in a state of constant resonance with their environment, automatically attuning to and matching the vibrational frequencies of those around them. This automatic attunement occurs below the threshold of conscious awareness, making it nearly impossible for the empath to prevent or control without specific training in energetic boundaries and psychic self-protection. In examining the relationship between empathic merging and the anima-animus dynamics, we discover additional layers of complexity. The empath's receptive, absorptive nature often indicates a dominant anima function, an openness to receiving and containing emotional content that can override the discriminating, boundary-setting function of the animus. This imbalance creates a psychological condition where the empath becomes all-receptive, but lacks the inner masculine principle necessary to establish clear demarcations between self and other. The integration of anima and animus becomes crucial for the empath's psychological health and effectiveness. The anima provides the capacity for emotional resonance an empathic connection, while the animus offers the discriminating wisdom necessary to determine which emotional contents serve the empath's highest good and which should be consciously rejected or transformed before integration. Synchronicity plays a particularly significant role in the empathic experience, as the dissolution of ego boundaries that characterizes empathic merging creates optimal conditions for meaningful coincidences to manifest. The empath often finds themselves encountering precisely those individuals or situations that mirror their own deepest psychological needs, creating a feedback loop where external encounters serve as catalysts for internal transformation. These synchronistic events are not random occurrences, but manifestations of the underlying archetypal patterns that govern empathic consciousness. They serve as guiding mechanisms, drawing the empath toward experiences that will facilitate the psychological development and spiritual evolution, even when these experiences initially appear overwhelming or depleting. As we progress deeper into our exploration, we must address the shadow aspects of empathic merging. The shadow of the empath often contains repressed anger, resentment, and a profound sense of being violated by the constant intrusion of others' emotional content. This shadow material may manifest as passive-aggressive behavior, martyrdom complexes, or sudden explosive reactions when the empath's boundaries are violated beyond their capacity to absorb. The empathic shadow also contains what we might call psychic toxins, the accumulated negative emotions and traumatic contents that the empath has absorbed from others over time. These toxins can create persistent depression, anxiety, and physical illness if not properly processed and released through conscious shadow work and energetic cleansing practices. The journey toward empathic mastery requires a fundamental shift from unconscious merging to conscious boundary management. This transformation begins with the recognition that empathic sensitivity is not an all-or-nothing phenomenon, but a capacity that can be consciously directed and controlled. The empath must learn to distinguish between healthy empathic resonance, which allows for understanding and compassion without loss of self, and unhealthy merging, which results in psychological absorption and energy depletion. This learning process involves developing what I term empathic discernment, the ability to sense the difference between one's own emotional contents and those that belong to others. This discernment operates both at the level of immediate emotional awareness and at the deeper level of archetypal and complex recognition. The empathically mature individual can recognize when they are encountering another's mother complex, shadow projections, or unresolved trauma, and can choose whether to engage with these contents or maintain protective distance. The development of empathic discernment is supported by regular practices of conscious introspection and emotional inventory. The empath must develop the habit of asking themselves, is this emotion truly mine? Does this feeling serve my highest good? Am I absorbing this content to avoid facing something within myself? These questions serve as anchors, drawing consciousness back to the authentic self and away from the merged state. The practice of energetic hygiene becomes essential for the empathic individual. Just as we cleanse our physical bodies of accumulated toxins and debris, the empath must regularly cleanse the psychic field of foreign emotional contents and energetic residue. This can be accomplished through various methods, Visualization techniques that involve imagining white light, cleansing the aura, breath work that consciously releases absorbed emotions, or ritual practices that symbolically return borrowed emotions to their rightful owners. Grounding practices serve as another crucial component of empathic self-care. The empath must learn to anchor their consciousness in their own body and personal energy fields, creating a stable foundation from which they can safely engage with others' emotional realities. This grounding can be achieved through physical contact with the earth, through mindfulness practices that emphasize bodily sensation, or through visualization techniques that imagine roots extending from the body deep into the earth's core. The role of nature in empathic healing cannot be overstated. The natural world operates according to clear energetic boundaries. Each tree maintains its own life force while contributing to the forest ecosystem. Each river follows its own course while participating in the larger water cycle. By spending time in nature, the empath can observe and internalize these models of healthy boundary maintenance while receiving energetic support from the Earth's stabilizing frequencies. In our continued exploration of empathic consciousness, we must examine the relationship between empathic merging and the process of individuation. For the empath, individuation presents unique challenges, as the natural tendency toward merger can conflict with the individuating drive towards psychological autonomy and self-definition. The empath must learn to maintain their empathic gifts, while simultaneously developing a strong, coherent sense of personal identity. This individuation process requires the empath to consciously choose when to merge and when to maintain separation. Rather than being at the mercy of their empathic sensitivity, the individuated empath becomes the master of their empathic capacity, wielding it as a conscious tool for understanding and healing rather than experiencing it as an overwhelming burden. The individuated empath learns to recognize that their sensitivity is not a weakness to be overcome, but a profound gift that requires conscious stewardship. They understand that their capacity for empathic merging makes them natural healers, mediators, and bridges between different consciousness states. But only when this capacity is employed with wisdom and discernment. As we examine the collective dimension of empathic experience, we discover that empaths often serve as unconscious processors of collective emotional material. They absorb and transform the unprocessed grief, rage, and trauma of their communities, serving as living alchemical vessels that transmute raw emotional energy into more refined psychological understanding. The collective processing function explains why empaths are often drawn to healing professions and why they frequently find themselves in situations where others spontaneously share their deepest emotional troubles. The empath's psychic field naturally attracts those who are carrying emotional burdens too heavy for them to bear alone, creating opportunities for mutual healing and transformation. However, this collective processing function can become problematic when the empath lacks the psychological tools to consciously engage with this role. When the processing occurs unconsciously, the empath may become overwhelmed by the sheer volume of material they are called to transform, leading to burnout, depression, and various forms of psychological and physical illness. The conscious empath learns to approach their collective processing function as a sacred responsibility that requires proper preparation, energetic protection, and regular periods of rest and renewal. They understand that their work serves not only the individuals they encounter, but the larger human community, as the emotional healing they facilitate creates ripple effects that extend far beyond the immediate situation. The transformative potential of conscious empathic work extends to the realm of what we might call empathic alchemy, the conscious transformation of lower emotional states into higher forms of psychological understanding and spiritual wisdom. When the empath learns to maintain conscious awareness during the merging process, they can serve as a transformative catalyst, helping others to process and integrate difficult emotional experiences while simultaneously refining their own psychological understanding. This alchemical function requires the empath to develop what I term emotional transmutation skills. The ability to consciously work with absorbed emotional content in ways that serve both self and other. Rather than simply absorbing and holding others' pain, the skilled empath learns to metabolize this pain, extracting its wisdom and returning it in a more refined, useful form. The development of these transmutation skills involves learning to work consciously with the archetypal energies that underlie emotional experiences. When the empath recognizes that another's anger carries the archetype of the warrior seeking justice, they can help transform that anger into constructive action. When they perceive that someone's depression carries the archetype of the soul in search of meaning, they can facilitate a process of spiritual exploration and renewal. The empath's relationship with their own shadow becomes crucial in this alchemical work. If the empath has not consciously integrated their own difficult emotions and archetypal patterns, they will inevitably project these unresolved contents onto others, creating confusion and ineffective interventions. The shadow-aware empath, however, can use their own psychological material as a reference point for understanding and working with similar patterns in others. The practice of conscious empathic work also requires the development of what we might call archetypal literacy, the ability to recognize and work with the universal patterns that underlie individual emotional experiences. This literacy allows the empath to see beyond the surface drama of personal emotions to the deeper archetypal themes that govern human psychological development. When an empath encounters someone struggling with betrayal, they can recognize the archetypal theme of the innocent encountering the shadow, and can offer guidance that addresses both the immediate emotional pain and the larger developmental challenge. When they encounter someone grappling with loss, they can perceive the archetypal pattern of death and rebirth, facilitating a process that honors both the grief and the transformative potential inherent in the experience. The empathic journey toward mastery also involves learning to work consciously with the collective unconscious as a source of healing wisdom. The skilled empath can access archetypal images, myths and symbols that offer healing perspectives on difficult emotional situations, drawing upon the vast reservoir of human wisdom contained within the collective psyche. This access to collective wisdom transforms the empath from a passive receiver of emotional content into an active facilitator of psychological healing and growth. They become bridges between the individual psyche and the collective wisdom traditions, helping others to contextualize their personal struggles within the larger framework of human experience. The development of empathic mastery requires ongoing attention to the balance between personal and transpersonal elements within the empathic experience. The empath must learn to maintain connection with their own authentic feelings and needs, while simultaneously serving as a vessel for transpersonal healing energies. This balance prevents the common empathic pitfalls of either becoming lost in others' experiences or becoming so self-protective that empathic sensitivity is diminished. The mature empath learns to approach their sensitivity as a sacred gift that requires conscious cultivation and protection. They develop regular practices of self-care, energetic maintenance, and psychological integration that allow them to sustain their empathic work over long periods without depleting their own life force. These practices might include daily meditation or contemplation periods that allow for the processing and integration of absorbed emotional material, regular periods of solitude that permit the restoration of personal energetic boundaries, and ongoing engagement with psychological or spiritual practices that support continued growth and development. The empathic path also requires the cultivation of what we might call empathic courage, the willingness to engage with difficult emotional realities while maintaining psychological stability and spiritual centeredness. This courage is not recklessness, but rather a mature confidence in one's ability to navigate challenging psychological territory without becoming lost or overwhelmed. Empathic courage develops through gradual exposure to increasingly challenging emotional situations, combined with consistent practice of self-care and boundary maintenance techniques. The empath learns to trust their ability to engage with others' pain without taking it on as their own, to offer healing presence without sacrificing their own well-being. As we near the culmination of our exploration, we must address the evolutionary significance of empathic consciousness in our current historical moment. The empaths of our time are called to serve as pioneers of a new form of human consciousness, one that can maintain individual integrity while participating consciously in collective emotional and spiritual evolution. This evolutionary function requires empaths to move beyond the traditional role of wounded healer or sacrificial caretaker toward a new archetype, the conscious transmuter, one who can work with collective emotional material as an alchemist works with base metals, transforming lower energies into higher forms of consciousness and understanding. The conscious transmuter represents a new stage in human psychological development, one that integrates empathic sensitivity with psychological mastery, spiritual wisdom, and practical effectiveness. These individuals serve as catalysts for collective healing and transformation, facilitating the evolution of human consciousness toward greater compassion, understanding, and unity. The development of conscious transmuter capacity requires intensive personal work, including shadow integration, archetypal understanding, energetic mastery, and spiritual development. It also requires ongoing engagement with collective healing work. As the conscious transmuter skills are developed and refined through conscious service to the larger human community, As empaths learn to embody this new archetypal pattern, they contribute to the emergence of what we might call collective empathic intelligence, a group consciousness that can process and transform collective emotional material with wisdom and skill. This collective intelligence represents humanity's growing capacity to deal consciously with the psychological challenges of our time, including trauma healing, conflict resolution, and the integration of diverse perspectives and experiences. The empathic individuals who are willing to undertake the journey toward conscious transmuter capacity serve as the advance guard of this evolutionary development, pioneering new forms of consciousness that will eventually become available to humanity as a whole. Their work represents not only personal healing and growth, but a contribution to the collective psychological evolution of our species. In conclusion, the phenomenon of empathic merging represents one of the most profound and significant aspects of human consciousness, a capacity that, when properly understood and consciously developed, offers extraordinary potential for both individual transformation and collective healing. The empath, who learns to work consciously with their emerging capacity, becomes a master of consciousness itself, capable of facilitating profound healing and transformation in both self and others. The journey from unconscious merging to conscious empathic mastery is not an easy path, but it is one that offers unprecedented opportunities for psychological and spiritual development. It requires courage, dedication, and ongoing commitment to personal growth and service to others. Yet for those who are willing to undertake this journey, the rewards include not only personal fulfillment and healing, but the satisfaction of contributing to the larger evolution of human consciousness itself. Let us honor the empathic individuals who are courageously exploring these frontiers of consciousness, recognizing them as pioneers of a new form of human awareness that holds the potential to transform our world. Through their dedicated work, they illuminate pathways toward a more conscious, compassionate, and unified human community, one that honors both individual autonomy and collective connection, both personal healing and transpersonal service. The empathic path is ultimately a path of love expressed through conscious engagement with the full spectrum of human experience. Love manifested through the willingness to serve as vessels for collective healing and transformation. It is a path that calls us to transcend the limitations of ordinary consciousness and to embrace our potential as conscious participants in the ongoing evolution of human awareness itself. As we continue to explore these depths, we must examine the profound relationship between empathic merging and what I have termed the participatory consciousness, a state of awareness in which the boundaries between observer and observed, healer and healed, become fluid and interchangeable. This participatory consciousness represents the natural state of the empathic psyche, one in which separation is revealed as illusion and interconnection as fundamental reality. In participatory consciousness, the empath discovers that they are not separate from those they seek to understand or heal. Rather, they are part of a larger psychological ecosystem in which all consciousness is interconnected and mutually influencing. This recognition transforms the empathic experience from one of burden and overwhelm to one of sacred participation in the larger mystery of existence itself. The development of participatory consciousness requires a fundamental shift in self-perception, From seeing oneself as an isolated individual who occasionally connects with others, to recognizing oneself as a node in an infinite network of consciousness. This shift brings both profound freedom and profound responsibility, as the empath realizes that their every thought, feeling, and action ripples through the collective field of human awareness. This understanding leads naturally to what we might call conscious stewardship of empathic sensitivity. The empath who recognizes their role within the larger ecosystem of consciousness approaches their sensitivity not as a personal burden, but as a sacred trust, a capacity that has been given to them in service of the collective well-being of all life. Conscious stewardship involves developing exquisite sensitivity to the subtle dynamics of energetic exchange, learning to discern which emotional contents serve the highest good of all involved and which perpetuate unconscious patterns of suffering and limitation. The empathic steward becomes a guardian of consciousness itself, facilitating experiences that promote growth, healing, and awakening while gently redirecting energies that lead toward unconsciousness and fragmentation. The practice of conscious stewardship also involves developing what we might call empathic wisdom, the ability to see through the surface appearances of emotional drama to the deeper patterns and purposes that are seeking to emerge. This wisdom allows the empath to respond to situations from a place of understanding rather than mere reaction, facilitating outcomes that serve the long-term evolution of all involved rather than providing temporary relief from immediate discomfort. Empathic wisdom develops through sustained engagement with both personal and collective unconscious material, combined with regular practices of reflection, contemplation, and integration. The wise empath learns to see patterns across time and situations, recognizing how individual emotional experiences connect to larger themes of human development and spiritual evolution. This wisdom also includes understanding the rhythms and cycles that govern empathic sensitivity itself. The wise empath learns to recognize when they are in phases of heightened receptivity that require extra self-care and protection, and when they are in phases of integration that allow for more active engagement with others' emotional material. As we explore the deeper dimensions of empathic consciousness, we must also address the relationship between empathic merging and what contemporary psychology terms neuroplasticity, the brain's capacity to reorganize and adapt throughout life. Recent research suggests that the empathic brain exhibits unique patterns of neural connectivity that support the merging process, while also possessing enhanced capacity for rapid reconfiguration in response to emotional input. This neuroplasticity offers both opportunities and challenges for the empathic individual. On one hand, it suggests that empathic sensitivity can be consciously developed and refined through appropriate training and practice. On the other hand, it indicates that the empathic brain may be particularly vulnerable to being shaped by external influences, making conscious boundary work even more crucial. The conscious empath can work with their brain's neuroplasticity to support their empathic development using visualization, meditation, and other consciousness training practices to strengthen the neural pathways that support healthy empathic function while weakening those that lead to unconscious merging and energy depletion. This neuroplasticity-based approach to empathic development involves treating empathic sensitivity as a skill that can be consciously developed rather than a fixed trait that one either possesses or lacks. Through sustained practice, even individuals who do not consider themselves naturally empathic can develop greater sensitivity and understanding, while those who are overwhelmed by their natural empathic capacity can learn to modulate and direct their sensitivity more effectively. The integration of empathic consciousness with embodied awareness represents another crucial frontier in empathic development. Many empaths become so focused on emotional and energetic dimensions that they lose connection with their physical bodies, creating imbalances that can lead to illness and energetic instability. The embodied empath learns to use their physical body as both an anchor for consciousness and a sophisticated instrument for empathic perception. They develop sensitivity to the subtle physical cues that indicate energetic shifts and emotional changes, learning to read the body's wisdom as a guide for empathic engagement. This embodied approach includes developing awareness of how different emotional contents affect the physical body, learning to recognize the bodily signatures of various emotional states and energetic influences. The skilled empath can often identify the source and nature of absorbed emotional material by paying attention to where and how it manifests in their physical form. Embodied empathic practice also involves using physical movement, breath, and sound as tools for processing and releasing absorbed emotional content. The empath learns to move energy through their body consciously, preventing stagnation and accumulation that can lead to illness and depletion. As we approach the culmination of our exploration, we must consider the broader implications of conscious empathic development for human civilization as a whole. The empaths who are learning to work consciously with their sensitivity represent the leading edge of a potential transformation in human consciousness, a shift toward greater emotional intelligence, spiritual awareness, and collective wisdom. This transformation has the potential to address many of the challenges facing our world today, from interpersonal conflict and social fragmentation to environmental destruction and spiritual disconnection. As more individuals develop conscious empathic capacity, we may see the emergence of new forms of governance, education, and social organization that honor both individual autonomy and collective well-being. The conscious empaths of our time are thus not only healing themselves and those they directly encounter, they are contributing to the transformation of human consciousness itself. Their work represents a form of evolutionary activism, a conscious participation in the emergence of new possibilities for human awareness and social organization. This evolutionary dimension of empathic work brings both inspiration and responsibility. The conscious empath recognizes that their personal healing and development contributes to the larger healing of our world, while also understanding that this contribution requires ongoing dedication to their own growth and service to others. In our final reflection, let us acknowledge the profound courage required to walk the empathic path consciously. The empaths who choose to develop their sensitivity rather than suppress it, who learn to work consciously with collective emotional material rather than simply absorbing it unconsciously, are pioneers of human consciousness itself. Their journey is not an easy one, requiring ongoing vigilance, continuous learning, and sustained commitment to both personal growth and service to others. Yet, it is a journey that offers profound rewards. Not only personal fulfillment and healing, but the satisfaction of contributing to the emergence of a more conscious, compassionate, and unified human community. Let us honor these brave souls who are willing to serve as bridges between worlds, as healers of collective wounds, and as pioneers of new possibilities for human consciousness. Through their dedicated work, they light the way toward a future in which empathic sensitivity is recognized not as a burden to be endured, but as a sacred gift to be consciously developed in service of all life. The empathic path is ultimately a path of love made manifest through conscious engagement with the full spectrum of human experience. It is a calling that invites us to transcend the limitations of ordinary consciousness and to embrace our potential as conscious participants in the ongoing evolution of awareness itself. For those who are willing to answer this call, the journey offers not only personal transformation, but the opportunity to contribute to the healing and awakening of our entire world.